As the sun slides down behind the growing clouds of night, I climb up the stairs to my bedroom on the top floor of the house I inherited, which stands in the little village of historic Washington, not far from where I was born. I sit on the edge of my bed and look out at the last streams of yellow fade in the sky. I stare at the place where a favorite apple tree once lived. Now, like my life, the place where the tree stood is empty, and loneliness lives in my room. I think of my childhood when I spent a large part of time sitting happily on a limb of a beloved hickory tree in the front yard of the house in McCaskill, another Arkansas village. That tree had a limb which bent out over the grass of the lawn as it met the blacktopped wall in front of the house. I don't recall the struggle of learning to climb. It seems I was just suddenly up there. When people walked into town and under my perch, I thought they didn't know I was up there. Old John would walk along slowly, kicking rocks, spitting out blobs of chewing tobacco, and talking to himself, or so I thought. Me and my hound dog need to catch something to eat, he would grunt as he scuffled along. Ain't got no more taste for moon pies. Not knowing then what moon pies were, my imagination would bounce up into the rolling clouds as I searched for the silent outline of a moon, obscured by the southern sun's powerful glare. I'm sure glad the world is flat, old Hamp would say to the wind as he waddled past my tree. If it wouldn't, we'd all fall off. He'd then bend down, over laughing in the center stage performance, which he repeated again and again for the child sitting high up in the tree balcony. John and Hamp were well-known characters of that little village. Both loved to talk. Both wore baggy trousers and scuffy shirts for days and days before they let their wives scrub them on the old metal washboards. Neither of them seemed to want to be anywhere except in that little two-story town. Both spent most of their days hanging out at the old service station so they could see who went by and who stopped in and who had something to tell about. Both of these old men had wives and children and cows and chickens. One of them had a truck, and they had friends. Or they never thought that anyone was not a friend. They never seemed to know loneliness. Loneliness for an only child in a tiny village far from the developing world is a cloak, both heavy and light. I had no reason to try to calculate the heaviness of that isolation, as I had no scale which could show the measurement of sometimes, never, always. I had no way to compare always to never as I sat in my tree or played alone. The light of imagination and dramatic pretending was also immeasurable for me. No one asked me if I thought everyone had a vividly vibrating imagination. No one told me that most people in the world had other things to do rather than just to pretend. I also spent hours and hours in my little playhouse behind the real house. There I could speak and laugh and whisper and weep through all my play scenes, and like the tree falling in the forest, be eternally unheard. My mind was highly stoked with images of birds, butterflies, sailing skies, howling wolves, and the music of my mother's voice. And the country voices of all the old Johns and old Hamps. Sitting alone in my tree and growing up as an only child did not help me to develop exceptional stages of conventional wisdom. My personal options were embossed with pieces of spirit inherited from my parents. Hear a story, be a storyteller. Watch the clouds, draw their faces. See the profiles of characters that live in a tree. Paint the lines and colors and images. And go far away to college to find the world. But I somehow remained disconnected, isolated, no matter where I was, always like a child, high up in a tree. Through 18 years of what I thought was a wondrous marriage with 3 brilliant and beautiful daughters, I often saw my husband fly off to exotic spots to pronounce things in the banker's language. One night, when we lived in Providence, Rhode Island, I met his plane and I watched him come slowly down to earth. He picked up his luggage and walked out to the car without a hint of embrace. I deciphered for another uncountable time that his tight lip was evidence of an international businessman with preoccupation with the world beyond my reach. We drove into town to our favorite pub. As the first sip of my choice wine touched my lips, I saw that he held onto the edge of the table with both hands. And then I heard him say, "I'm getting a divorce. I'm moving to Boston. I've got a child on the way." As if he were speaking to some distant acquaintance. We drove home to forever sleep in separate bedrooms. I watched him leave the next morning with suitcase, raincoat, briefcase, and a pair of tennis shoes slung over one shoulder. Now I sit on the edge of my bed and watch the sun's last streaks of yellow welcome the approaching night outside the window of my inherited house. I look for tree shadows on the grass, but my apple tree is gone. The sky darkens. There's not the sound of anyone, anywhere. But the stories I'll write, and the visions I'll paint. I'll paint them as they swoop down to me as the stars begin to gleam.